Thursday morning, the President of the United States announced Iran would be hit very hard that night, and that America would be taking Kharg Island in the not too distant future, the terminal that moves roughly 90% of Iran's crude. By Thursday afternoon, the strikes were off. Same day, same voice. I want to walk you through what actually happened because the whiplash is the story here. The morning message was about as explicit as these things get. Strikes were coming that night. Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export terminal, was pushed onto the table as the future prize. The United States would assume what he called total control of Iran's oil and gas market. It named a target. It named a timeline. Then, hours later, the same voice announced the strikes and bombings were cancelled. Because discussions had reportedly been brought to the highest level of Iranian's leadership and approved. Discussions tied to a deal that would reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And keep the backdrop in mind, because none of this happened in a vacuum. Just days before, American strikes hit radar and drone infrastructure around Qasem Island. Iran answered with launches toward U.S.-linked targets in Kuwait and Bahrain. Both sides had already drawn blood, carefully, in measured doses, each one trying to look dangerous without tipping into something neither can control. Think of Thursday as a fuse, lit in public, in front of the whole world. In the morning, pitch out before sundown. So why light it at all? The simplest read is that the morning thread was the move, not the strike itself. When one side wants to push the order toward a deal, it raises the price of saying no. And Kharg Island isn't a random target. It's the artery. By most accounts, somewhere around 90% of Iran's crude exports flow through that one island. Take it, and Iran's oil income gets squeezed at the point where it hurts most. So when Washington names it publicly, the message to Tehran is simple. The one thing Tehran cannot afford to lose is now on the table. There are really only three explanations floating around for the cancellation. 1. The threat worked. The back channels moved fast, and Tehran gave enough ground to call it progress. 2. Someone in the room did the math on an oil shock plus a wider war and decided the cost was too high that night. 3. A bit of both. Honestly, we don't have the private communications, and nobody outside those rooms does. Iranian officials, for their part, keep saying no deal is finalized. So the approved at the highest level framing is, for now, one side's version of events. Here's what we can actually pin down. The threat and the cancellation both happened on the same Thursday, just hours apart, in public. Kharg Island really is the choke point of Iran's oil economy, and Hormuz is the choke point for a huge share of the world's seaborne crude. Energy and shipping markets moved on whiplash because traders suddenly had to price both versions of Thursday at once. And Tehran has acknowledged that negotiations are being reviewed, but not the approval, and not the deal. Now, if this story has been coming at you through the headlines, the temptation is to pick a version. Either the threat was a bluff that got walked back, or it was a pressure that worked. I'd argue the more interesting question is who each message was actually for. The morning threat wasn't only aimed at Tehran, it was aimed at every tanker owner, every insurer, every government watching Hormuz. A reminder that Washington can reprise the entire Gulf with one post. And the afternoon cancellation wasn't only aimed at a domestic audience. It told Tehran, I can switch this off as fast as I switch it on. So deal with me while the off switch still exists. Iran is running its own version of the same play. Its threats to close Hormuz are real in capability but painful in practice. Shutting the strait chokes Iran's own remaining exports and angers the very customers it depends on. That threat is pressure applied from a position of economic pain, not strength. Both sides know that, and both sides know the other side knows it, which is why so much of this plays out as performance. Each side acting out resolve for an audience that includes the other side, their own publics, and their markets all at once. So who actually came out of Thursday ahead? Tehran gets a story it can carry at home. America threatened the unthinkable and backed off within hours. So we stood firm and dragged them to the table. Washington gets the mirror image. The threat was so credible it produced talks at the highest level by the afternoon. Both stories can't be fully true. Neither can be fully disproven. That's not an accident. That's the design. The side that benefits from the distraction is Israel, because the Lebanon front keeps moving while the world's attention sits on the Gulf. The clear losers are the people who need predictability. Shippers, insurers, anyone whose business lives and dies on oil prices. And here's the part I want you to sit with for a second. Every threat made loudly and cancelled quickly makes the next threat a little cheaper to ignore. The dangerous moment isn't when the threats are loud, it's when they stop being believed. Because at that point, the only way to make people believe again is to actually do the thing. So what happens next? My read? Iran stays deliberately vague, neither confirming the deal nor killing it, because ambiguity keeps its options open and clarity causes leverage. Washington keeps the strike option visibly warm, and if talks stall, I'd expect another limited hit on peripheral military targets rather than anything near Kharg. Because after Thursday morning, doing nothing costs more credibility than a small strike does. If a partial Hormuz arrangement gets announced, expect it to arrive loud and land soft. Big headline, slow implementation, verification fights almost immediately. And if Tehran publicly walks away, the White House almost has to respond with some kind of military action, or the next very hard tonight means nothing to anyone. So here's my bet, and I'll own it. No seizure of Kharg Island this year. And better than even odds, we get a fragile, partial arrangement around Hormuz within a few weeks. Announced with fanfare, implemented in fits and starts. What proves me wrong is simple. Actual strikes on Kharg, or a clean deal publicly confirmed by both sides. Either one kills my read. You might push back on what I'm about to say, and that's fair. I don't think the morning threat was ever a plan. I think it was a price tag, a way of showing Tehran exactly what continued resistance cost in public, where it couldn't be unsaid. The problem with price tags is that sooner or later, somebody asks Washington to honor one. The fuse didn't go out on Thursday. It's still sitting on the table, just a little shorter than it was on Wednesday. One Thursday, two announcements, and the fate of the world's most important oil choke point flipped twice before dinner. And that's the game of nerves Trump, Tehran, and everyone shipping through Hormuz are now locked into. That's where I land. I'd love to hear your read on this. Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you got something out of this, please like, share, and subscribe. See you in the next video.